Welcome. Thank you so much. So thank you, first of all, for being here. We didn't even get to meet backstage, but it's good to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here, although fluffball is a hard act to follow.
It is, for you and me both. I'm curious, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. So you were doing responsible AI before most of us were talking about AI. Microsoft, very early on, had this committee, Aether, that you were involved with, really looking at what was coming down. Talk about how those conversations started out, how your role started out, and how, we'll get into where they are now, but talk about sort of the evolution of what it means to be talking responsible AI within one of these big companies.
Yeah, I remember I was involved in starting the very first research group in responsible AI at Microsoft, which is called the FATE group, and this is still a vibrant research group today. And it really started when we said, okay, people want to put AI to work in important applications, but it's clear they don't understand what they need to think about, what the risks are, but we don't either. And so, we realized that we needed to do research about what was important here and how we were going to address those issues. And so we started a research group and started figuring out what are the questions we even are supposed to ask. And it's come a long way since then, but it was pretty interesting because it's different type of work than you would traditionally see in computer science. And so we had to bring in experts from the social sciences and behavioral economists and other disciplines to really start going after this problem.
And what were some of the conversations you were having a few years out? Like, I remember a lot of this was being talked about. What were some of the things that were on the radar, and what were some of the surprises, the issues that you hadn't thought as much about?
Yeah, I think, responsible AI, one of the first issues that popped for people was fairness, right? There was famous studies like the gender shade study that showed that these systems did not work as well for, different groups of people. And so that was something that was on people's radar, I think, really early on in the process. I think that generative AI and where we've gotten to today has kind of exploded the surface of considerations. And so, now we're talking about things like, well, part of responsible AI is keeping an agent on task. And so I think we've been just really surprised to see how much the field has needed to expand, because you have to think about security and privacy and fairness and all of these different principles, and there's kind of a lot to it.
And how do you feel like we're doing? Because from the outside, I feel like, there's a lot of good people doing serious work. I talk to them all the time at your company, at Google, at OpenAI. Like, I talk to people, and it definitely feels like there's seriousness and a lot of brains being thrown at the problem, but I also feel like there's a lot being pushed out with impacts that are very unclear, and I still am not convinced that a lot of it isn't, at the end of the day, what I hear from the leaders, not the folks working on safety, is, technology always brings good and bad. And I agree with that part. Yeah. But I think the corollary is often, therefore, the good will outweigh the bad and we'll just push it out there. And I think that, to me, is not. Like, to me, responsibility means that you look at the product and imagine all the foreseeable harms and mitigate them to the best of your abilities. Are we really seeing that with generative AI? Are we really seeing, not just Microsoft, but in general, the best possible work at mitigating the harms?
So I think this is an incredibly important question and something that the whole field needs to be asking itself every single day. I think what I would say is I've actually been very positively surprised with generative AI, how much the world has woken up and said responsible AI is incredibly important and we don't want this technology without it. And we've seen, the regulations starting to follow with that. We see customers demanding it. And so I think we've seen many organizations actually invest significantly in it. And I don't think I would have expected that working in the field 5 or 6 years ago with the attitudes towards responsible AI. So I think there's been kind of an enormous growth and innovation, but there's still a lot to be done to use this technology in all the ways that people want to use it. Like, there's lots of challenges that we haven't figured out yet, and it's not something that like a big tech company can do alone. We need a whole ecosystem around that. Like, consumers need to be educated about the parts they need to play. We need to have regulation. And so I think it's going to take time for that whole ecosystem to come together. And so I think we're at the beginning of this journey, but the start is stronger than I expected it to be.
And you mentioned the regulation piece, and obviously that's just one piece.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, my sense is, you could like or dislike the types of regulations that were being talked about a couple of years ago. You can like or not like the EU's AI Act, but there were efforts to start regulation. It really feels like that dialogue has receded into the background. I mean, if you look at the difference between the AI summits that were in Bletchley Park and Seoul, where it was really, how can we safely deploy this technology? By contrast, Paris felt like, no offense to TechCrunch disrupt. It was like everyone was looking for OpenAI and others to build in their country. Is there a danger with, being shaped as us versus China? It's a race. We've got to win. There is merit to that, but it does feel like the responsibility piece is now not being pushed at the regulatory level, at least at the federal level, and there's a lot of pressure on Europe, which has been in the lead, to back off. Does that hinder the efforts overall for responsible deployment of AI?
So I think that there's a healthy tension that's happening here, because one of the challenges with how to implement AI responsibly for this technology is that the patterns are so new and we're still figuring them out. And so to figure out how to create regulation that achieves the outcomes we want, but keeps pace with the change of technology, and frankly allows us to still innovate even in the responsible AI side, I think is a big challenge. And so I think we see excitement about wanting to do this, and then some realization on how difficult it is to do it, and that kind of back and forth. And so I suspect once we have some more patterns we feel good are working, we'll kind of see people search for it and want to really codify those again. And I think to give an example of this, a couple of years ago, if people were writing regulations, you'd say you have to clean your training data. But we know with foundation models that you actually want to expose the model to all of the different types of data, and then post-training is way more effective in enabling it not to produce those harmful outcomes. And so that's a totally different type of approach, and to write the regulations that are more focused on the outcome you want instead of the process is not something that is normally done in regulation. And so I think we're just in the journey of figuring out how to do that well, and so there's both enthusiasm and concern that we're kind of swinging back and forth between.
And the other thing is just the sheer pace of it, and it's come up already in our conversation. It's going to come up throughout the day. I mean, I know even covering AI full time, it's moving faster than I can keep up with. I'm sure that's the case for the companies. It especially seems like on the responsibility side, it's really hard to keep up when the usage, in addition, the technology is evolving faster than anything I've seen in my career, and the different uses. If you take something like a chatbot, now it's being used as a companion. It's being used for medical advice, mental health. Like, how much is the pace? How do you sort of wrap your head around it? How well do you think we're doing at keeping responsibility at pace with a development pace that is incredibly fast?
So I love the way you frame the challenge, because so many people are just focused on the technology changing, but it is equally the diversity of applications and the creative ways people are putting this to use that are a challenge with responsible AI, because that context matters. And so that is definitely the challenge we're dealing with every day. I think that what I like about it is that it actually throws a lot of options just kind of off the table. So, frankly, 5 years ago, a lot of how everybody did responsible AI was, let's fly in a lot of experts and let's solve it once here. Then let's fly in a lot of experts and let's solve it over here. And, that works, but it is very much limited by like how many responsible AI experts you have. And when we started seeing the scale and diversity and pace of this, it's like, actually we need to invest in, significant responsible AI platform and automation, things like building automated testing, building, real-time guardrail systems that can operate at enormous scale, but that we can change very rapidly. And so we really had to increase our investment to be able to move at that pace and scale. But that's, I think, led to so much more opportunity and innovation for us in responsible AI. And so it's really pushed us into a new place that I don't think I expected to get to. But it does keep us on our toes. We have to work every day and be prepared for unexpected things coming at us.
There's obviously a ton in responsible AI. There's a ton when we say AI, we mean a bunch of different technologies. I want to zoom in on a few of the really tough ones that you can see good uses, you can see bad uses. One of those is certainly the role of AI chatbots as companions, having a relationship. That can be really positive. It can be, I envision, just like Fluffball is really fun for my mother-in-law. I can envision chatbots that talk to people who are homebound and have conversations. A lot of health uses. But we've seen when it's certain groups of people, whether they're young and impressionable or at the borders of mental health, have conversations, it can go really badly. How do you think about how to responsibly have an AI that, whether we like it or not, is becoming a companion, it's becoming something we talk with?
I think this is one of the most important questions that we are working to figure out, because there is so much potential upside here, but you really have to think about what are the kind of the controls and guardrails around it, and the experience for one person might be not the right thing for someone else. And so we've had for years work on human AI interaction and how do you empower the user and how do you put the right amount of transparency in place. And so we're building on top of all of that, but I think there's going to be some learning as we go here. And so we really need to make sure that we are kind of watching for these different circumstances, learning what needs to happen, making sure we're taking feedback, and working with experts in the external community as well. And so I don't think anyone has the answer of what this should ultimately look like.
Has there been a wake-up call, though, within Microsoft, similar to what other companies have talked about realizing, people are having a different level of relationships. People are not necessarily having that rational interaction that they might have had with their computer before?
I think this is one of the things that I love about Microsoft, having been in this space and adjacent spaces for so long. Actually, when we shipped Bing Chat at the very beginning, one of our initial investment areas we called manipulation, but it was exactly the AI sort of changing the behavior of the human. And we've had people who have been working for years on how to use AI as a therapist and what are the best practices there. And so it was something that's been on our radar very early. And something I think we actually expected to happen, but that doesn't mean that solving the problem is easy, right? There's lots of things to figure out as a society together to get to a place that we all feel good about.
And you mentioned manipulation. I'm curious, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, I think we're all pretty aware, one of the next thing that's going to happen is advertising is going to come in. It's too big a market not to, there have been rumblings with ChatGPT. I think we all know it's coming, but it, to me, seems potentially really dangerous when you have a technology with at least human, if not soon to be superhuman, persuasive capabilities. Yes, it could show an ad now, but it could also persuade me over time to do almost anything. What guardrails need to be in place before we put advertising into chatbots, and what would a healthy interaction look like?
I think this is part of the spirit of the field of alignment, which is, some of this technology, some of the goal has to be that it's aligned with the user intent and what the user really wants. And so I think we can't kind of forget that part, that the AI system should be working on behalf of the user, not necessarily the people.
But doesn't advertising inherently change that? Because to me, that is the relationship I have with my chatbot today. One of the, there's plenty of criticisms that people make, but I feel like it's just trying to answer my question.
It depends on the intent, right? If I'm shopping for a hotel for my next trip or something, then bringing options that I'm going to be interested in are, I think, exactly aligned and surfacing things that I might not know about. But there's other cases where maybe if I, don't want to order more matcha, then I shouldn't have it, keep
or
pushing
beauty
that
products
on
for teens. Yeah. I think the nightmare scenario, which again, to me, a lot of this traces back to lessons we never learned during the social media era. Yep. I mean, Meta, I believe, had some research. Companies, you can actually see, this person is insecure and vulnerable. There is an opportunity to sell them a product. I think many of us look at that in horror.
Yeah.
Are we ready to put chatbots when we haven't even solved these in the social media era? Are we ready for advertising in chatbots?
I think that any of these things will have to be done step by step, and we have to have both the feedback and the guardrails in place, so if we find that it's not working, we can make adjustments quickly, right? There's going to be things that people try that turn out to not make sense, but the thing is to make sure that we're doing it gradually and we're learning as we go.
So turning to another really easy topic, recursive self-learning. This is where the machines learn and get better on their own. This is both really exciting and terrifying. I feel like we're at that moment in a lot of sci-fi movies where they go back in time and blow everything up because it all went downhill from here. I assume you guys are having these conversations. I certainly hope you're having them. You know, how do you build machines that can learn on their own but, you know, don't destroy us in the end?
So we're even having like a simpler version of this problem right now with agents, because a lot of what we do with these systems at the moment is say, okay, we'll just test it a lot pre-deployment and know how it behaves, and then you can sign off and ship it, and then of course you're going to monitor some. But the thing is that agents are exciting because because they're so dynamic, and all of the action, all of the interestingness happens after you ship it. And so we are now building in both like ongoing observability and ongoing controls, so you can say, look, these are the things that I care about, these are the metrics that matter to me, these are the guardrails that I want in place, and make sure that those are happening durably as the system runs. And so if you think about a system that's not just being dynamically taking actions, but learning as it goes, then we need a more kind of robust approach to that ongoing observing and human oversight, and that ongoing kind of controls and guardrails. And so I think we're starting that foundation with the simpler technology, but it's going to have to look like same kind of playbook where we're still putting humans in control ultimately, and that's going to have technology to support us, but it's also going to have processes and humans and accountability and all of that as well.
And one more super light, easy topic, autonomous warfare. And I know this is one that you all thought about long ago. Like I remember when Aether was really getting started. Like, but at the time, I think there was a hope that there would be a more clear division between we're not going to use this for military purposes. It was a huge discussion in Silicon Valley. Yeah. Lots of people within the tech companies, within Microsoft, within Google, were saying, we don't want this technology used in that way. And it seems like what we found is, yes, there's that discussion, which is an important discussion we really haven't fully had, of how much do we want autonomous weaponry normalized, allowed, et cetera, and if we don't, how do we even enforce that? But then there's a lot of things you can do to use AI for military purposes that aren't just a drone. And I'm curious, how have the conversations within Microsoft evolved around what Microsoft is okay doing and not doing? Obviously, it's come up a lot around Palestine and Gaza, but I'm curious, what are the conversations like around these topics?
Yeah, I think certainly on many topics, including this one, as the field matures and as our understanding matures, the conversations evolve. And so I think that you did have a lot of people in the field start with, okay, we never want the technology to be used in any of these examples. And I think it's evolved to say, like, we really think it's important to think about the concept of fit for purpose and human oversight. So first of all, does the technology actually work appropriately for that use case? Because there's a lot of examples you see where it's not really doing what people think it should be doing, and so it's not even appropriate to use it there.
But in some cases, it's fit for the purpose of the country that wants to use it, right, but it's not arguably fit for humanity, and I'm curious.
Right. And so then I think it's back to the human oversight and governance and deciding whether or not, if it works in that case, is it an appropriate use of it? And that's something that I think society has to decide, and that's exactly where things like regulations and international standards around this are really important, because it's not for one company, like we should put forward our thoughts and opinions, but one organization should not decide that for the world. That's something that the world needs to jointly decide for itself.
Well, I would love to continue this lighthearted conversation. I'm told we're out of time, but I appreciate you, one, for coming here and having the conversation, but also I think it's critically important that the companies building these technologies continue to have these conversations of where the technology is at and where it's going.
I completely agree, and I thank you for the very thoughtful questions, because I think these are some of the most important topics of our time, and we do need everybody actually involved in this conversation. As I said, one organization is not going to do it alone.
Thank you so much. Sarah Bird.
Great. Great. Thank you.